It's easy to take for granted, isn't it? You pull into a station, grab a nozzle, and fill her up. But it wasn't always this simple. Way back, before the corner gas station was a thing, getting fuel for your brand new automobile was a real chore. You couldn't just pull up to a pump. Instead, you'd have to go to the local hardware store or even a blacksmith. Your fuel, which was usually kerosene back then, was kept in a big barrel. You'd tell the guy how much you needed, and he'd pour it into a can for you. Then, you'd head back to your car, stick a funnel in the tank, and carefully pour the kerosene in, hoping you didn't spill it everywhere. It was slow, messy, and frankly, pretty dangerous. This whole process was a headache, and a clever fella named Sylvanus Bowser knew there had to be a better way. He was tired of the mess and the fire risk that came with handling kerosene for lamps and stoves, so he invented something revolutionary: a hand-cranked pump. His first design was intended to safely dispense kerosene from a barrel. It had a one-way valve, which meant the fuel could only go out, not back in. Even better, he calibrated it so that one full turn of the crank would dispense exactly 1 gallon. No more guesswork, no more sloshing fuel out of a can. It was a simple, genius solution to a dirty problem. Soon enough, these newfangled pumps started popping up on city sidewalks. They weren't gas stations as we know them. They were just curbside pumps, usually operated by an attendant. You'd pull your car over to the side of the road, and a guy would come out and crank the fuel right into your tank. But people are a skeptical bunch. Drivers started worrying they were getting shortchanged, that they weren't really getting a full gallon for their money. To solve this trust issue, the visible fuel pump was born. The attendant would first pump the fuel up into a big glass bowl on top of the machine, showing you the exact measurement before gravity fed it down a hose and into your car. Now you could see exactly what you were paying for. But this solution created a whole new problem. At the turn of the 20th century, in 1900, there were only about 8,000 cars in the entire United States. They were a novelty. But just over a decade later, by 1912, that number had exploded to 1.2 million. Suddenly, cities were choked with cars, and they were all lining up at these little curbside pumps. The pump's small 50-gallon tanks couldn't keep up with the demand, and the lines of cars waiting for fuel created massive traffic jams. The system was overwhelmed. It was clear that a bigger, better, and more organized way to get fuel into all these new machines was desperately needed. The age of the curbside pump was coming to an end. As America's love affair with the automobile heated up, the old way of doing things just wasn't cutting it. The answer arrived in 1913 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Gulf Oil Company did something nobody had ever seen before. They opened the world's first dedicated drive-in gas station. This wasn't just a pump on a sidewalk, it was a purpose-built facility. It had a big canopy to protect customers from the weather and a small office for the attendant. But the real innovation was hidden underground. Instead of a tiny 50-gallon tank, it had a massive storage tank buried safely beneath the station. This tank fed 6 different pumps, which meant multiple cars could fuel up at the same time, off the street. The success of this first station was immediate and staggering. On its very first day, it sold a respectable 30 gallons of fuel. That might not sound like much, but remember, this was a brand new idea. By the end of that first week, sales had jumped to 350 gallons per day, with fuel costing about 27 cents a gallon. Drivers loved the convenience. They could pull in, get their fuel quickly without blocking traffic, and be on their way. This model was a game changer, and pretty soon, these purpose-built filling stations started popping up all across the country, forever changing the landscape of American roads and making long-distance travel a real possibility for the average person. Around the same time, another major change was happening under the hood. Car engines were getting more powerful and they needed a more potent fuel than kerosene. The industry shifted to gasoline. Now gasoline was a byproduct of refining crude oil, and for a long time it was considered a useless waste product. But it turned out to be a fantastic fuel for the internal combustion engine. There was just one big problem. It was far more dangerous than kerosene. The key difference is something called a flash point, the lowest temperature at which a liquid gives off enough vapor to ignite. Kerosene's flash point is 38 degrees Celsius, so it's relatively stable. Gasoline's flash point is a bone-chilling minus 40 degrees Celsius. What this means is that gasoline is always producing flammable vapor, no matter how cold it is outside. This vapor is invisible. heavier than air, and can travel along the ground until it finds an ignition source, a stray spark, a lit cigarette, anything. Suddenly, storing and handling fuel became a much more hazardous job. The risk of fire and catastrophic explosions at these new filling stations was a very real and constant threat. The simple engineering of the early days had to get a whole lot smarter, and it had to do it fast, because the demand for this powerful, dangerous new fuel was only going to grow. The days of simple pumps and gravity-fed hoses were numbered. Safety had to become the top priority. For decades, getting gas was a full-service affair. An attendant would pump your fuel, check your oil, and even wash your windows. But in 1947, a guy in California named Frank Ulrich decided to try something radical. He figured if he could cut out the cost of the attendant, he could sell gas for a lot cheaper. So, he opened the first ever self-service gas station. By letting customers pump their own gas, he dropped the price from 23 cents down to just 18 cents per gallon. People loved the savings, but the oil companies and, more importantly, fire departments hated the idea. They thought it was incredibly dangerous to let untrained folks handle highly flammable gasoline. The main concern was spills. Without a trained attendant watching the pump, it was all too easy for a customer to get distracted. You might start the pump, walk away to pay, or just not pay close enough attention. Before you knew it, the tank would be full and gasoline would be gushing out onto the ground, creating a massive fire hazard. Because of this risk, the idea of self-service was quickly banned in most states across the United States. It seemed like a good idea in theory, but in practice it was just too risky. The dream of cheaper, faster fueling was put on hold until someone could figure out how to make it safe. The solution didn't come from a big corporation, but from clever engineers working on a very specific problem. They needed a way to make a gas pump nozzle that knew when to stop all by itself. The answer was the automatic shutoff nozzle. An early simple version of this device used a little mechanical float inside the tip of the nozzle. As the fuel level in your car's tank rose, it would lift the float. When the float reached a certain height, it would trigger a mechanism that would trip the handle and shut off the flow of gasoline. No more overflows, no more dangerous spills. It was a brilliant piece of mechanical engineering. With this new, safer nozzle, the idea of self-service finally became practical. Gas stations started to reintroduce the concept in the 1960s and 70s, and this time, it stuck. Drivers could now enjoy the convenience and lower prices of pumping their own gas without the fire department having a panic attack. This little invention completely transformed the industry. It reduced labor costs for station owners and gave drivers more control and faster service. The friendly, full-service attendant slowly became a thing of the past, replaced by a clever piece of hidden engineering that most of us use every week without ever thinking twice about it. Today's gas station is a symphony of hidden engineering, designed for maximum safety and efficiency. It all starts deep underground with the storage tanks. Unlike the old steel tanks that would rust and leak, modern tanks are made of double-walled fiberglass to prevent corrosion. But the real magic is inside. They have an overfill prevention valve, which is basically a flapper that automatically closes when the tank is about 95% full, stopping the delivery truck from pumping in too much fuel. Even the vapor is managed. When a tanker truck fills the underground tank, all the displaced gasoline vapor is captured by a second hose and sent back to the truck. It's a closed-loop system that prevents dangerous fumes from escaping into the air. That same level of clever engineering is right there in the nozzle you hold in your hand. The modern automatic shutoff doesn't use a float anymore. It uses a mind-bending physics principle called the Venturi effect. As fuel rushes through a narrow point inside the nozzle, its speed increases and its pressure drops. This low pressure creates a vacuum that sucks a tiny stream of air through a small hole at the very tip of the nozzle spout. As long as that hole is clear, air flows and the fuel keeps pumping. It's a simple, elegant system that is constantly monitoring the situation inside your tank. The moment the fuel level in your car rises and covers that little air hole at the tip, the magic happens. The airflow is cut off. The vacuum can no longer pull air from the outside, so it starts pulling air from a small, sealed chamber inside the nozzle that contains a flexible diaphragm. The suction causes the diaphragm to pop upwards, which releases a set of tiny ball bearings. These bearings were holding the handle mechanism open, and as soon as they're released, the whole thing collapses, and the main fuel valve slams shut with that familiar thunk. It happens in an instant, stopping the flow of fuel precisely when your tank is full. All this incredible engineering has made fueling our cars safer and more efficient than ever before. In fact, stations are so efficient now, and cars go so much farther on a gallon of gas, that we actually have fewer gas stations today than we did back in the 1970s. We just don't need as many. But the ones we do have are pumping an unbelievable amount of fuel, something like 3 billion gallons every single day around the world. So next time you fill up your tank, take a second to appreciate the hidden dirty work of the engineers who made it all possible. It's a complex, dangerous job made simple, safe and clean, right at your fingertips.